Hello people, welcome to Screenbusters. You know, I've been watching Archer for more than 10 years now. Also, I must have rewatched this show at least 3 times over the years. And I've been doing just that recently in anticipation for season 11. And I gotta tell you, there's something that's been bothering me for a while now. Namely, when is this show taking place?
Time's kind of a factor here, so...
The thing is, the time period in the Archer universe is really confusing. At first glance, it looks like a no-brainer. It must be sometime in the 70s or something, right? Well, judging from the show's fairly consistent use of automobile and firearm models that were manufactured or still wildly used during the 70s and 80s, or from the old-timely looking computers and other technology, all of that, combined with the general fashion and aesthetics on the show, it's tempting to say that it is. But it might be too soon for us to throw on our Levi's jeans and head out to the disco, because this bubble starts bursting faster than bazooka bubblegum when you notice that they have flat-screen TVs, cell phones, and even the internet complete with search engines.
Second in the nation, actually, which even the most cursory internet search will corroborate.
Yeah, doesn't fit well with the whole late 70s, early 80s vibe they got going on. Now I know what you're thinking. Obviously the show isn't trying to be consistent or realistically similar to our reality. I mean, they have cyborgs and mind control chips and even a shrink ray. And you're absolutely right. Actually, the show's creators have been pretty open about that. As art director Neil Holman said in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, quote, "The vague timeline allows us to cherry-pick the stuff that we like and ignore the elements that we don't. We can have muscle cars from the 70s, computers from the 80s, and cell phones from the 90s. So as I've said, this annoying vagueness about the show's time setting has been bothering me for a long time.
And if there's one thing I love more than triumph, it's annoying vagueness.
And now that we know it's intentional, is it even possible to tell when this show is happening? I say, definitely yes. In fact, I would argue that we can determine the exact year the show is starting from in Season 1, Episode 1 by sticking to these 2 base assumptions. First assumption. The Archer timeline is basically identical to ours up until the end of World War II. We can assume that much because historically speaking, the Archer universe offers basically no evidence to the contrary. Countries and cities have the same names, and historical events and dates before the end of World War II coincide with ours pretty much perfectly. Second assumption. The only things we can examine and use to answer our question are events that happened on the show, the correlation of those events to our timeline in our universe, and how they relate to the characters on the show. We can only look at these things as reliable information exactly because of what we talked about in the beginning of this video, with the cars, weapons, culture, and technology being chronologically inconsistent with our universe. Another little assumption we would have to make is that the show is consistent continuity-wise, meaning that anything that happens during an episode would carry over to later episodes, which does seem to be the case. Okay, with all of that out of the way, we can finally get to solving this thing. Like I said before, to find our answer we need to examine characters and events on the show to try and build a coherent timeline. Let's start by looking at the oldest character on the show, Woodhouse. In Season 2's Episode 5, The Double Deuce, Woodhouse tells Archer about his service as a Batman in the Royal Air Force during the Great War in 1917. According to him, he was amongst the youngest servicemen in his squadron, so we can assume that he was probably 18 at the time, meaning he must have been born around the year 1899. After losing his commanding officer, with whom he was suspiciously close with, Woodhouse traveled the world to finally settle in Tangier after winning a bar in a dice game and naming it Reggie's Bar. Another key character to figuring out when the show is happening is Malory Archer. In Season 2's Episode 7 titled Movie Star, Malory reminisces about being recruited to serve in the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, while solving a crossword puzzle on a bus. She was recruited by a man named Wild Bill Donovan. Donovan was the real head of the OSS during World War II between 1942 and 1945. We assume that Malory was around her early to mid-20s since she mentions that she was at the start of her acting career and by looking at her audition picture. So then we can assume that she was born between 1916 and 1923. Malory says that 3 weeks later she was killing a man in Tunisia, conveniently placing her geographically close to our next point of interest. As it happens, our next point of interest is the birthplace of Sterling Archer. Malory was pregnant and on the run after killing a man in Morocco.
Please, I just killed a man and I think my water just broke, so I could really use a drink.
Presumably, she was still an OSS operative operating in North Africa. That's when she stumbled upon Woodhouse at his bar in Tangier. Woodhouse helped Malory deliver the baby right there on the bar, only to immediately be confronted by her pursuers, who were none other than German agents accompanied by local militia.
Nichts bewegen! Sie sind verhaftet!
The only time period this scenario could have logically played out is during World War II, which puts Sterling's birth date somewhere between 1942 and 1945. Now, some fans have theorized that Archer was born after 1945 during Operation Gladio, which was a NATO-backed paramilitary network established after World War II, inspired by fear of the Soviet Union. It was also called the Stay Behind Network, since if the Red Army invaded Europe, its members would stay behind enemy lines to disrupt Soviet control. The operation ran from 1956 to 1990, much later than when we suggested Archer was born. The fans in question are referring to a piece of trivia found in Season 3's episode titled Lo Scandalo. In this episode, Malory talks about a young man who might have been Archer's father. She says that he was gunned down in the streets during Operation Gladio by Malory's current lover, Savio Mascalzone, the now Prime Minister of Italy. Thus, Archer must have been born or at least conceived after Malory met this man, presumably during the operation, so going upwards from the year 1956. Mascalzone is found dead in Malory's apartment, tied to a chair and wearing a latex gimp suit. On a side note, that's actually based on the real death of French banker Edward Stern. Anyway, back to Operation Gladio. Although that might have been Archer's father that Malory was talking about, the fact that he died during Operation Gladio does nothing to prove that they met during the operation, or that Archer was conceived in that time frame. Those could very well have happened before that time, so it doesn't contradict our little theory.
Hang on, this is far from over. Talk to me.
Okay, getting back on track. The next logical step would be to try and pinpoint the exact year that Archer was born. For that, we can look to Season 4's episode Once Bitten. While on a mission in Turkmenistan, Archer gets bitten in the taint by a Caspian cobra. Archer, delusional and on the brink of death, passes out and finds himself in a Christmas Carol type scenario led by the ghost of actor James Mason. In this flashback of his most significant early life events, Archer relives his forgotten memory of meeting his real father on his 6th birthday. Archer is home alone because Woodhouse is indisposed and his mother is away. When asked by the ghost of James Mason why she was away, Archer replies that his mother is on her way to overthrow the Guatemalan democratically elected government. The operation Archer is referring to has to be Operation BP Fortune, which was a covert United States operation to overthrow the democratically elected Guatemalan president Jacobo Arbenz that began in 1952. Assuming that this was the beginning of the operation, and Archer was 6 at the time, Sterling's date of birth is the year 1946, which doesn't fit our previous estimate of between 1942 and 1945. However, it looks like Archer is unsure of his age at the time, and it's very plausible that he might be off by a year, meaning it could actually be his 7th birthday, putting his birth in exactly 1945. So now that we've calculated that, the only thing left for us to do is to figure out Archer's age at the beginning of the show. For that, we need not look further than the first 10 minutes of the show's pilot episode, Mole Hunt, where we can clearly see in Archer's file that he is 36 years old. So with a quick calculation, we can determine that the year the show officially starts is the year 1981.
Pretty sure you just answered your own question.
Take that, Adam Reed.
Yes.
Thank you for watching Screenbusters. If you liked what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe, and we hope to bust your screens again soon.